Discover the sinister truth behind my cabins. 7 haunting rules every guest must follow. Clara felt the chill creep up her spine as she read the faded words scrawled on the crumpled note. 7 rules that felt more like ominous warnings than mere household guidelines. The flickering bonfire of their new home in Crystal Pines seemed to cast sinister shadows across her mind, filling her with both dread and anxiety. Trust no one. Never explore after dark. Always lock the doors. What kind of place had she brought her son to? The familiar scent of pine and damp earth wrapped around them like a security blanket as they settled into the old cabin. But Clara couldn't shake her unease. On her better days, she chalked it up to exhaustion. After a year balancing 2 jobs and raising a retreating teenage boy, she was a little jumpy. But Jake was no ordinary teenager. Last she'd checked, he was slipping through the cracks of adolescence, retreating into a world of loud music and silent battles. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the woods came alive with unsettling sounds, rustling leaves, soft murmurs that clung to the edges of the wind. They had only been there a few days, yet Clara felt the weight of the isolation pressing down on her, an invisible hand squeezing her shoulders. It's just the woods, she told herself. But that didn't stop her heart from racing with every snap of a twig. Even Mr. Harris, their new neighbor with that cheery demeanor, sent a shiver through her. He was friendly enough, offering cider like it was a token of safety. But as she watched him linger just beyond the tree line at dusk, Clara's gut twisted into knots. Lucas, a coworker who had left the city, kept feeding her creepy folklore about the area's stories of things lurking in the shadows, of eyes watching from the dark. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, as shadows pooled around her cabin, Clara's laughter faded into tense silence. For the first time, she grasped the fear that crept into her thoughts. Was the wind whispering to her, or was it all in her head? The cabin creaked around her like it had a heartbeat. Each sound amplified her anxiety until she practically jumped at every branch that cracked outside. Then came the moment that solidified her terror, a shadow darting past the kitchen window. Fleeting and quick. Jake's eyes sparked with excitement, while she felt cold panic grip her chest. The city had readily armed her with the belief that help was only a phone call away. But now, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to lean closer, every fiber of her being screamed that they were utterly alone. She rushed to the door, hand trembling on the knob as those old rules floated through her mind, more apparent now than ever. She turned back, but just as she did, another sound, a faint whisper, almost like laughter, echoed in the woods, wrapping around her heart like icy fingers. And then she understood. They were not as alone as she thought. The rules were not old wives' tales. They were lifelines smeared in blood, and the chilling realization twisted Clara's gut. Frantically, she locked the door and turned, only to find Jake gone, drawn into the waiting shadows. A note lay in his place, written in a familiar hand, a taunt or warning. She could only stand frozen, heart racing. The trees around her now whispering, promising secrets, with a truth that either bound them together or would tear them apart forever. Her pulse thudded in her ears as Clara stared at the note, anxiety coiling tighter in her chest. The handwriting loomed large, almost mocking her with its familiarity. I found something, it read simply. Follow me. But where could he possibly have gone? Jake! She shrieked, pushing the door open. The night swallowed her voice, the cool air wrapping around her with a suffocating chill. For a second, she just stood there, paralyzed by her own fear and the oppressive darkness of the woods. Shadows swirled like whispers, darting between the trees, leaving nothing but uncertainty in their wake. The flickering light from the cabin barely penetrated the night, creating a cocoon of blackness beyond the threshold. Step by step, She moved toward the tree line, hesitant yet driven by terror. Branches scratched at her arms, the world around her growing more alien with every cautious footfall. "Stay close," she murmured to herself, recalling the rules that clung to her like cobwebs. But did they mean anything now? The wind howled low, a mournful tune that tugged at her insides. Each rustle seemed to call her name, a siren song pulling her deeper into the unknown. Heart racing, Clara glanced back, her cabin appearing distant, a grain of safety fading from view. Focus. She had to focus. But then there it was again, the laughter, echoing in her mind, Jake's voice twisting through the trees, taunting her. "Jake," she called out once more, desperate now. What if he was hurt? Or worse? The thought sent icy dread crawling up her spine. The woods were alive with rustling creatures, but this sound was different. It had a cadence, a rhythm, like a childhood game in the twilight, a spark of playfulness amid her dread. She followed the laughter, her feet crunching through fallen pine needles. The further she walked, the more the trees seemed to tighten around her, forming a claustrophobic prison of twisted branches. Then, dimly, she saw light filtering through the trees. A clearing? Hope flickered inside her like a candle-less flame. Rushing forward, she burst into the small glade, breath hitching in her throat. Moonlight spilled like liquid silver across the ground, illuminating a small bonfire that crackled wildly. And there, locked in the specter of shadows, was Jake, his form silhouetted by the flames. "Jake," she panted, wavering between relief and rage. But as he pivoted, she noticed his eyes wide, not with excitement, but with terror. They were alive with fear. Shadows danced upon his features, revealing a depth of horror she had never seen before. "Mom, don't come any closer," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't understand." Instantly, Clara froze. What was happening? Around Jake, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy. Something lurked just beyond the light. Figures, intangible but menacing, fluttered at the edges of her vision. Whispers, low and urgent, circled her like a predator closing in. "Jake, what is it? What did you find?" His voice trembled. "Is watching us. They want something. Something from us." Clara's stomach twisted. The laughter, the shadows, everything shifted. She stepped back instinctively, as if the trees themselves could sense her growing horror. "We need to go. Now." But even as the words left her lips, the shadows swelled, thickening around them. Unseen hands grasped her throat. Panic surged through her veins. A haunting refrain echoed deep in her mind, "Trust no one." And standing there, in the flickering light of the bonfire, surrounded by lurking terror, Clara realized the rules weren't designed to protect them. They were chains binding them to the malevolence around them. The laughter returned, rising up in a dissonant chorus as the shadows pressed closer. Clara turned, heart racing, only to find the path to the cabin swallowed by darkness. The woods had conspired against her, and then, in the depths of that darkness, she heard a voice, a call soft yet ominous, weaving through the trees as it reached for her. Join us, join us." What did it want from them? She could barely think, the fear wrapping around her heart, squeezing tighter. She glanced at Jake, who looked as lost as she felt. The weight of an impending choice hung over them. Fight against the shadows or surrender to whatever awaited them in the dark. Behind her, the laughter swelled to a crescendo, choking off her thoughts. Clara prepared to run, but something deep within held her back. Would they be mere sacrifices to whatever cursed this land? The answer loomed as large as the trees, choking her breath. Moments stretched painfully as the shadows danced closer. They had to act now, but could they trust each other? As the darkness thickened, one question loomed. Who or what were they really up against? Clara's breath quickened as the shadows swirled around them. Panic clawed at her throat. "Jake!" she shouted, a desperate plea surging forth. But before he could respond, the atmosphere shifted again, thickening like fog in their minds. A chill swept through her, carrying whispers, echoes of forgotten voices that filled the void with malevolence. She braced herself, terrified of what lay ahead. The fire illuminated Jake's face, yet it felt like a fragile barrier against the chaos creeping toward them. "What do they want from us?" she asked, shaking. The urgency in her voice only deepened the fear in Jake's eyes. But before he could reply, something shifted in the shadows. A figure emerged, not from the woods, but from the very darkness that encircled their flickering light. It was a silhouette, grotesque yet almost hunched as though it was still forming, the night itself contorting around it. Clara's heart lurched. Behind her, the laughter grew louder, echoing off trees like an ominous celebration. "Join us" floated again on the wind, now accompanied by the rhythmic thump of something yet unseen. "Stay right by me, Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling. The warmth of the fire pulled at her, but the shadows beckoned from all sides, their intentions unclear yet palpably sinister. The figure was closer now, its shape becoming more defined. Clara's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. Didn't he just want them? It needed them. She felt its gaze piercing through the dim light, unearthing the vulnerabilities they had tried so hard to hide. Suddenly, Jake cried out, "Get back!" He lunged towards her, shielding her from whatever horror was taking form. In that moment, Clara realized the bond they shared was not just of mother and son, but of a primal instinct to survive, to escape whatever haunted these woods. But did that make them weak? And in that fleeting instant, the shadows pressed tighter, as if testing them. Clara felt panic rise sharply as darkness clawed closer. The air was thickening, becoming congested with their shared fear. She could almost taste it, an acrid bitterness that burned in her throat. "Mom," Jake's voice cracked, "we have to get to the cabin," yet the trees seemed to shift, the path behind them closing, contorting in a manner that defied logic. "No," Clara shouted, feeling the desperation claw at her sanity. "We need to find a way out." With a primal scream, she grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him toward the sliver of moonlight shining ahead. The fire's warmth faded as they stepped away from its glow, and the forest enveloped them in an unsettling hush. Footsteps echoed behind them, not their own, but something else, the kind that sends a chill racing down your spine. Clara glanced over her shoulder, her heart in her throat. Was it following them? The laughter twisted into a wail, stalking them like a predator tracking its prey as they raced deeper into the trees. Jake pulled Clara to a stop. "Mom, look," he pointed, breath hitching. There, tangled in the roots of an ancient tree, was a metallic object glinting in the dark. Clara's pulse quickened. "What is it?" she breathed, both fear and curiosity battling within her. "I don't know," Jake replied, staring transfixed, the fear washing over his face as well. "But it feels important." With a shared look of determination, they stepped closer, their hearts pounding in unison. The air grew static, buzzing with an unsettling energy. Clara reached out toward the object, a sense of trepidation coursing through her veins, but instinct urged her forward. Just as she was about to grasp it, the shadows surged, roiling with anger, swollen with life, as if protesting her intrusion. Clara and Jake stumbled back, breathless and wide-eyed. The darkness writhed, and with it came a chilling echo that sent shivers down their spines. "Don't touch what's not yours," it hissed, the voice splitting the air, malevolent and terrible. In that moment, Clara realized something: the forest wanted them, not to simply join its haunted legacy, but to bind them to its dark essence forever. As they stood on the precipice of a terrifying truth, one question fell between them. Would they have the strength to confront the darkness or become yet another tale spun by the trees? The laughter returned, more sinister than before. As the ground beneath began to tremble, Clara seized Jake's hand. "Run," she yelled, knowing their fate teetered on the edge of the illuminated path, veiled in shadow. But as they dashed forward, a new sound filled the air, a low, drawn-out moan, reverberating through the depths of darkness, promising something far worse than they had yet faced. What had they awoken? What had they disturbed? Clara's scream pierced the night as they plunged into the unknown, the figure in the shadows drawing closer. Would they escape, or would the curse of the woods clutch them tightly in its grip? Branches snagged at Clara's clothes as they fled, tearing at her skin like the claws of unseen creatures. Every step felt heavier, as if the forest itself conspired to hold them in place. "Don't look back!" she shouted, though her heart pounded in a wild rhythm that screamed for her to check their pursuer. Jake stumbled, his foot catching on an uprooted root. Clara spun around just in time to see him fall, panic flooding her veins. Without hesitating, she grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "Keep moving. We can't stop." The moaning grew louder, a deep, horrifying resonance that rattled her bones. "Mom, what is that?" Jake gasped, his voice quivering as fear pooled in his eyes. Clara dared a glance over her shoulder. The shape was closer now, its features shadowed yet unmistakable, a twisted face with hollow eyes that glowed faintly. As if lit from within by hellfire, she wrenched him forward, forcing every ounce of strength into their escape, desperation propelling them deeper into the night. The laughter morphed again, now shrill and mocking, rising around them like a twisted song. Clara felt warmth pooling in her throat, her breath burning with exertion and dread. Just a little further, she panted. Ahead, a faint light flickered through the trees. The cabin. Hope ignited within her, but the darkness seemed to respond, curling around them, trying to snuff out that fragile flame. "Mom, it's coming," Jake cried, glancing back. Clara felt her heart drop into her stomach. The figure unfurled with terrible grace, moving as though the shadows themselves propelled it. The earth trembled beneath them, a low growl emanating from the depths of the forest. "Run!" she screamed, the word tearing from her throat as they pushed through the underbrush, thorns snagging at their skin, the cold air burning in their lungs. Every instinct screamed to flee, but a sickening thought slithered in her mind. What if the cabin wasn't safety? What if it was the very source of the horror that chased them? "Mom!" Jake shouted again, stumbling as the ground seemed to shift underfoot. Clara seized his other hand. Their fingers intertwined a desperate bond in the face of the encroaching terror. "Almost there," she urged, the light growing brighter, clearer, emerging from the gloom like a beacon. But just outside its reach, the shadows surged again, and Clara felt herself pulled back, as if the forest was trying to reclaim them. The cabin loomed ahead, a silhouette against the starless sky, wooden planks creaking ominously as they approached. What awaited them inside? Was it merely a refuge or a prison crafted by the very darkness they tried to escape? As they reached the door, Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. With trembling hands, she twisted the knob, feeling the cold metal bite her skin. The door creaked open, revealing a dark interior that smelled damp and stale. Without another thought, she thrust Jake inside, following him quickly, shutting the door against the howling night, heart racing. She pressed her back against the door, fear squeezing at her chest. But in the stillness that followed, that suffocating silence, the shadows outside didn't dissipate. They lingered, pulsating with life, waiting, watching. "What do we do now?" Jake's voice broke the tense air. The darkness pressed against the windows, the cabin appearing to shrink under the weight of unrelenting dread. Clara scanned the room, searching for an answer. Old furniture loomed in the darkness like ghostly presences. The air grew humid, thickening with a palpable unease. "We stay quiet and hope it doesn't find us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But even as the words left her lips, a soft, deliberate scratching began at the door. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "It knows we're here," she murmured, instinctively pulling Jake close. What had they awakened? What did the forest want from them? And as the scratching grew louder, a voice whispered through the door, chilling them to their cores. "Join us." Each beat of Clara's heart echoed in her ears as she felt the shadows stir around them. Would they survive this night, or would they be consumed by the darkness forever? The moan from outside transformed into a cacophony of voices, each one calling out their names, weaving a grim symphony of despair. Clara knew they had entered a realm far beyond their comprehension. Could they withstand the pull of a darkness that craved their very essence? Or would they succumb to the shadows that hungered for their souls? A sinister question loomed as Clara tightened her grip around Jake. Was this merely the beginning of their nightmare? The scratching turned into a relentless pounding. Clara pressed her palms against the door, feeling the vibrations as if the cabin were a living creature. Jake's small body trembled against her, his fearful breaths sending icy daggers through her heart. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos outside. She urged, her own throat dry and tight. She desperately scanned the room for any way out, but the darkness seemed to fold in on itself, trapping them in an invisible net. The old newspaper clippings and photos lining the walls depicted smiling families in happier times, now haunting reminders of the lives that had slipped away. "Join us," the whisper echoed again, but this time it felt more like a command than a plea. Clara's vision darted toward the windows. Shadows danced closer, wiry figures with hollow eyes. Just beyond the glass, a sinister audience waiting for their show. "Mom!" Jake tugged at her sleeve. His wide eyes mirrored her fear, reflecting the terror that had gripped them both. "What do we?" A raucous laugh erupted outside, slicing through the air like a jagged blade. Clara felt it shatter something deep inside her. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to scream. This couldn't be the end. Not here. Not now. Suddenly, the front door rattled violently, as if someone or something on the other side was desperate to enter. "Let us in," came the panicked voices, discordant and pleading. "We can help you. Don't let it take you. You'll regret it." "Mom, please," Jake begged, his grip tightening around her waist. Clara swallowed hard. "We can't open that door." Each word was a battle. "We have to find another way." "Where?" he cried. "Where do we go?" She took a breath, urgency driving her decisions. The only other room was a dark hallway that loomed behind them, leading into an obscured area. The thought of stepping away from the door nearly made her heart stop. But the screams of the unseen grew louder, drowning all rational thought. They didn't just want entrance. They demanded it. Clara's thoughts raced. She gathered her courage, drawing Jake closer. "We'll check the back," she decided. "Stick close." Carefully, she turned, each step towards the hallway feeling like walking into the mouth of a beast. The air thickened. A dense fog wrapped itself around them, damp and cold. Clara glanced back. The door remained rattled, but for now it held. As they slipped into the darkness, her stomach churned with dread. The air was sweeter here, musty but liberating at the same time. It felt like discovering the eye of a storm, but tension held its reign. In the dim light filtering through the cabin's walls, she saw frames, old memories trapped forever in dust. "Mom, what if we get lost?" Jake's question hung like a balloon ready to burst. "We won tea," she reassured him, though the tremor betrayed her confidence. "Just remember to stay right by my side." They crept further into the shadowy corridor, the pounding at the door growing more frantic. "You think you're safe in there?" A voice jeered, filled with distorted glee. "We just want to help you, to save you from that thing." "Help?" Clara hissed. "What thing?" "Join us," echoed back, an unnerving harmony of voices rising and falling. Then, Clara noticed that the floor beneath them started to pulse, vibrating slightly in sync with the dark whispers outside. She felt as if the cabin itself was alive, breathing, shifting like it had its own heartbeat. "This place is wrong," she muttered, realizing that their refuge was merely another trap. At the end of the corridor, a door hung slightly ajar, beckoning to them with a flicker of light. Could it lead to freedom or deeper into the nightmare? Clara glanced at Jake, searching for courage in his innocent eyes. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing dread. "Yeah," he breathed, but the uncertainty painted his face. They stepped forward, their shadows merging with the darkness, and just as they reached for the handle, a deafening crash resounded from the front of the cabin. The door burst open, and an enveloping darkness flooded inside. "Mom!" Jake shouted, panic threading through his voice. Clara's heart raced as the shadows roared in delight, engulfing the cabin. The pulse underfoot intensified. "Hold on," she screamed, grabbing his hand to pull him through the door before the darkness consumed them completely. What lay beyond the threshold? Was it an escape or the final embrace of the haunting grip that chased them? A primal fear gripped Clara as she and Jake stepped into the unknown. They stumbled through the door, plunging into a chaotic whirl of blinding light. Clara squinted, her heart hammering in her chest. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air shifted, a sharp contrast to the heavy dread of the cabin. The mustiness faded, replaced by a bitter, metallic scent. "Mom, where are we?" Jake asked, his voice trembling against the vastness around them. Clara shielded her eyes, taking in their new surroundings. They found themselves in a dimly lit room, vast and empty, the walls lined with shelves that buckled under the weight of dust-covered books. In the center of the room stood an ancient table marked with strange symbols that twisted into agonizing shapes. "Maybe we can hide here?" Jake whispered, glancing nervously towards the door where the shadows shrieked in rage. "No, we can't stay," she replied, forcing her voice to stay calm. "We have to find a way out." The shadows emitted guttural growls, their voices a cacophony, the essence of despair, mocking, pleading, cheering. Clara's stomach twisted. They were still here, lurking just beyond the door. She eyed a window on the far side, faintly illuminating the room. Taking a step closer, Clara felt the vibrations of the floor beneath her, pulsing subtly like a heartbeat, creating a rhythm that echoed the terror from the cabin. She dared a glance behind her, her pulse quickening, still aware of the unsettling noise. They were close, but she couldn't decipher their intentions. "What if they follow us?" Jake asked, his small voice a retreat into softness. "They can't enter here, right?" She muttered, trying to reassure herself as much as him. "It's just one step at a time." As Clara neared the window, the shadows grew frantic. "You can't escape," they cried, voices rising in horror-filled harmony. "You belong to us. Join us." The window was old, reinforced with iron shutters that looked as if they hadn't been opened in years. She reached for the latch, fingers shaking, the cold metal biting into her skin. She pulled with desperation. Nothing. "Mom, please," Jake pleaded as banging echoed from the door again, the shadows rearing up like a grotesque storm gathering strength. "Stay close," she snapped, panic tightening its grip. Heart racing, she jiggled the latch harder, despair clawing at her throat, but it wouldn't yield. She felt trapped, corners closing in, shadows closing out all hope. "Is there another way?" she asked, her voice cracking under the pressure. Jake's wide eyes roamed the room, searching for an answer. "Maybe we can climb?" He pointed to a steep, narrow staircase that spiraled upward like a question mark. "Up? Do you think it'll lead somewhere safe?" he asked, a flicker of hope sparking in his voice. Clara hesitated. What waited up there? But could they afford to stay? The shadows were relentless. "Okay, let us go," she responded firmly, forcing calm into her racing thoughts. She grabbed his hand, squeezing hard enough to anchor them both as they dashed toward the staircase. As they climbed, the pounding behind them grew louder, more vicious. "You're ours," the echoing voices screeched, an amalgamation of sounds crash-landing like waves against a rocky shore. With each step, Clara felt the temperature drop, the light dimming around them. A feeble lantern dangled from the ceiling, swaying erratically as they ascended, emitting flickers that danced with the shadows. Heavy breathing filled the air, but it wasn't just theirs. The door at the top of the stairs pulsated, a faint glow spilling through the cracks. Clara reached for the knob, but a creeping dread froze her hand. "Is this safe?" Jake whispered, his breathing shallow. "Only one way to find out," Clara replied, fear drumming in her ears. The whispers outside grew fervent, as if their excitement built, anticipating whatever horror lay behind that door. She turned the knob, determination flooding her with sharp adrenaline. But what awaited them? Was it salvation, or had they just sealed their fate? With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, ready to confront whatever nightmare lay beyond. And that's when the laughter erupted deep, guttural, echoing through the confines of the staircase, chilling them to their core. "Welcome back, Clara." The door swung open, and a putrid gust of air slapped Clara's face. The laughter echoed around her, reverberating against the cold walls. "Welcome back, Clara." It wasn't he just mocking. The voice held a familiarity that twisted her stomach. The room beyond was deep and dark, the glow spilling from within barely illuminating the jagged edges of a wooden chair, an overturned table, and thick, dark stains creeping across the floor. Clara took a tentative step inside, heart rattling in a cage of ribs. Jake clung to her hand, his tiny grip a lifeline amid the rising dread. "Is this really where we're supposed to be?" Jake's voice quavered, almost inaudible. Before Clara could respond, the door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like thunder. The sudden finality of it made her knees buckle. Shadows writhed in the corners of the new room, slithering along with grotesque movements that defied logic. Goosebumps raced down her arms as the whispers wrapped around her like chains. "Join us, Mom," Jake whimpered, and she felt his hand trembling in hers. "Stay close," she commanded, steeling herself despite the chill crawling up her spine. With no time to focus on the whirling darkness around them, she plunged deeper into the room, desperately searching for a semblance of escape. She locked eyes with a mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. Its surface was murky, like water disturbed by unseen feet. Clara approached it, her heart racing, driven by an unexplained urgency. The moment she stepped closer, Jake gasped. "Look," he cried, pointing. In the depths of the mirror, unfamiliar figures appeared, shadows of people she could barely recognize. They looked distorted, faces twisted in confusion or pain. She leaned forward, breathless, feeling an inexplicable pull towards them only to be yanked back as the figures began to scream soundlessly, mouths contorting into exaggerated gasps. "Mom, don't!" Jake pulled her arm, panic lighting his eyes. "It's a trick." Paralysis gripped Clara's throat, but her curiosity gnawed at her. She turned her attention back to the room. Her surroundings seemed to shift, the walls breathing in and out like the echoes of a dying beast. "Where are they?" Clara asked herself, glancing for another way out. "Who?" Jake replied, confusion lacing his words. "The people in the mirror," she said softly, fear shimmering in her gaze. Suddenly, the laughter returned, stronger than before, echoing from the very walls, as though the room itself delighted in their confusion. "You will understand," the voice taunted, deepening, swirling ominously around them. Then, Clara felt a cold draft snaking around her ankles. She turned just in time to see the floor begin to ripple like water, dark tendrils stretching out, reaching for her and Jake with a gleeful hunger. Her instincts kicked in, and she yanked Jake back, urgency sending alarm bells clanging in her mind. "Run!" she shouted, tears of terror blurring her vision. She spotted a narrow doorway on the far side of the room, a sliver of hope amid the chaos. In sync, they sprinted toward it, dodging shadows as they coiled out like desperate hands trying to drag them down as they neared the door. It swung open, but instead of salvation, a searing light poured forth, illuminating faces twisted, agonizing bodies on the other side. They were laughing too, a terrible sinuous flow of amusement. Clara skidded to a halt, tugging Jake close. "What are they?" Before she could finish, the ground shifted violently beneath them, cracking open a chasm that oozed darkness, threatening to swallow them whole. "Mom!" Jake screamed, eyes wide with terror. "Hang on!" she yelled back, but the abyss was relentless, yawning wider, pulling at their feet. The laughter grew deafening, drowning out his cries, merging with an ominous chant. Clara fell to her knees, dragging Jake down with her as the darkness beckoned. "Please no," she gasped. Just then, out of the warm, blinding glow, 3 figures emerged, illuminated in radiant light with palms outstretched singing a haunting melody, promising refuge or betrayal. "What do we do?" Jake shouted, his voice quaking with fear. But Clara didn't have the answer. All she could do was stare as the figures loomed closer, their faces unrecognizable but eerily familiar, weaving closer and closer like moths to a flame. And it hit her she knew them, but who were they to her? As the shadows roared and the figures beckoned, she felt the pull stronger, the urge to step forward as the figure's eyes glinted with secrets. What lay ahead? Would they drag her back to darkness? Or was there a way to uncover the truth, her truth? She breathed in the heavy air. The choice was theirs, but would the answers lead them to freedom or doom? The blinding light enveloped them, pulsating like a heartbeat. Clara's vision swirled, caught in the brilliant luminosity. She tried to shield Jake's eyes, but horror seized her heart while the familiar figures danced nearer. Their smiles were wide, too wide, their eyes glinting with a knowing that sent shivers rippling through her spine. Mom Jake's trembling voice brought her back, anchoring her in the chaos. The shadows circled tighter, and she could feel the darkness clawing at her heels, desperate to pull them into its dismal belly. Panic surged. They had to make a choice. Do we go to them? Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. They look nice, but Jake faltered, his innocent belief wavering under a tide of fear. Stay back, Clara ordered, taking a step forward instinctively. The three figures shimmered with an unearthly grace, their hands extended, beckoning. Deep down, she felt the pull, a yearning to understand why this place felt so hauntingly familiar. She had seen them, she just needed to remember. The moment she took a step closer, Jake tugged her shirt. Mom, no. His voice shattered the heavy silence, vibrant and frantic. Clara, join us. The voices of the figures rose, intertwining with the laughter still echoing around them, a chorus of insanity. It resonated with something deep inside her, an echo of long-buried memories that clawed at her sanity. You'll find what you've lost. Images flashed before her mind's eye, flickers of laughter, childhood games, and warmth now replaced by dread. But then another piece slid into the puzzle, the dark stain that marred the floor, the hollow eyes of the distorted reflections, and the despair lurking behind each laugh. No, she shouted, urgency rocketing through her veins as she realized the truth. You're deceiving us. The figures hesitated, their smiles faltering for the briefest moment, and the shadowy arms around them stiffened. Clara turned, determination hardening her resolve. Jake, we need to move. Now. As they dashed toward the opening, the gaiety drained from the figures' faces. Their laughter twisted into something more sinister, echoing with an emptiness that chilled her to the bone. You can't escape the truth, they warned, voices rising, merging into a tide of chaos as more shadows emerged from the walls, faces contorted in anguish. Clara sprinted, dragging Jake through the doorway. They burst into a new chamber, the brightness swallowed by overwhelming darkness. Panicked breaths filled the oppressive air, and Clara's heart raced like a train hurtling down the tracks. Is this safe? Jake cried, glancing behind where the light of the figures faded but the shadows stretched ominously. I don't know, Clara gasped. We have to keep moving. A flicker of pale light danced at the edge of the new room, drawing them forward. Felt like a siren-esque call, dangerously inviting. What if it's another trap? Jake whispered, eyes wide with fear. Maybe, but we don't have a choice. Clara's voice trembled. Every step felt heavier. Purpose battled against unease while the air thickened, the shadows whispering of despair behind them. As they approached the flickering light, an old, rotting door loomed ahead. The frame was engraved with symbols that writhed like live serpents, the wood aged and warped. She reached out a shaking hand, hesitating for just a heartbeat. What if it leads us into more darkness? Jake's question hung in the air, a dread-laden echo. With a deep breath, Clara steeled herself. The choice loomed larger than ever: follow the light, plunge into the unknown, or retreat back to the twisted laughter that chased them. Before she could decide, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a low growl rumbled from the shadows, a warning shot that sent icy dread coursing through her veins. You must choose or be consumed by the void, it hissed. The moment extended, frozen in terror. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears, the weight of the choice suffocating. Would this door lead them to salvation or madness? As Clara ripped the handle with all her strength, ready to step through, she felt a chill nipping at her heels. She didn't know what awaited them on the other side, but silence fell heavy, as if the world held its breath, waiting for them to take the plunge. And with that, they stepped into the unknown. The moment Clara pushed through the door, she stumbled into a world that felt like a waking nightmare. It was a small, dimly lit room, the walls lined with dark wood paneling that pressed in on her like a vice. A musty smell filled the air, thick and suffocating, as if she had just walked into the belly of some ancient beast. The flickering light source revealed grotesque paintings, unrecognizable figures twisted in torment, and it squeezed her heart with icy fingers. "What is this place?" Jake breathed, peering around, his wide eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know, but we need to be quiet," Clara whispered, stepping cautiously over a tattered rug that felt cold beneath her feet. The flickering light flickered once more, revealing fleeting shadows that skittered across the floor, evaporating the moment she tried to focus on them. Mom Jake's voice trembled, echoing off the damp walls like a soft cry for help. "Shoo, we have to listen." Clara strained to hear anything but the frantic pounding of her heart. The oppressive silence was broken only by the faint, distant sounds of scraping, like nails on a chalkboard, sending shivers up her spine. Something was moving in the dark corners, something hungry. Without warning, the flickering light went out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. Clara felt Jake grab her hand, squeezing it hard enough to crush bones. She wished she could reassure him, but fear had locked her voice away in its grasp. "Mom, I can't see," Jake whimpered. "Just stay close to me." She felt her way along the wall, fingers brushing against the dank surface, every scuttling noise growing louder, more frantic. Clara's instincts screamed for her to run, but she was rooted in place. Something whispered her name soft, seductive. "Clara, come play," the voice wrapped around her mind, a lullaby steeped in malice. She didn't recognize it, yet it felt too familiar, like a shadow she couldn't shake. "Jake, keep moving," she urged, pulling him forward even as dread pooled in her stomach. Suddenly, the light returned in a blinding flash, illuminating a figure in the center of the room, a woman whose face twisted into a grin that chilled Clara to her core. The figure wore a threadbare dress that hung like rags, and her eyes burned with an unnatural glow. "Welcome, dear Clara," the woman crooned, her voice sliding across Clara's skin like ice. "We've been waiting for you and your son." Clara's breath hitched, the warmth fleeing from her body. "What do you want?" she gasped, stepping back instinctively as the woman advanced. "To share what you've forgotten. It's all here if only you let us show you." The shadows flickered, and Clara noticed pairs of wide eyes peering from dark corners in the room. The figures of children, torn garments, and sunken cheeks watched with pleading expressions. A sense of desperation reached out, wrapping around her heart. "Jake, don't!" Clara's words were cut short as Jake, entranced, walked toward the woman. "Mom, she knows what happened," he shouted, his voice echoing with raw innocence. "No." Clara lunged forward, grabbing Jake's arm. The ghosts in the shadows hissed softly, a chorus of sorrow that made her stomach churn. "Turn back while you still can," the woman hissed, her expression shifting into rage. "You cannot fight what is destined." Clara felt heat rise in her chest, a pulse of defiance. She would not let them take her son. "We're leaving." With a sudden burst of resolve, she tore Jake back, turning to flee. But the room warped around them, the walls shifting like living flesh, closing off their escape. The laughter of the children turned into shrieks, layering with the woman's cries. "You cannot leave until you know." Trapped, Clara faced the growing horror. "We have to find another way out." But a shadow loomed, coiling tight, dark tendrils wrapping around her and Jake. The ground trembled beneath them again, a reminder that fear always loomed close. "Mom, I don't want to stay here," Jake cried, pulling against her. She felt the icy breath of the darkness brushing against her skin, urging her to give in. "We have to find the truth," she murmured, staring defiantly into the shadows weaving around them. As the walls tightened their grip and the whispers grew into a haunting wail, Clara knew they were caught in a snare of their own memories. Would acknowledging the pain set them free or bind them forever to this wretched place? Just when it seemed they would be consumed entirely, an ear-piercing scream echoed through the hall, halting the advance of the encroaching darkness. Clara and Jake exchanged terrified glances, both heartbeats thundering painfully in their chests. What had they just awakened? And what sacrifice would be required to escape? As the scream reverberated through the space, it shattered the heavy silence like glass. Clara's heart raced. Fear coiled tighter around her. She pulled Jake closer, eyes flickering through the shadows. What were they up against? Before her stood the figure of the woman, embers of rage sparking in her hollow gaze. You dare defy fate? She spat, voice thick with venom. The air thickened with a disorienting weight, like a storm ready to unleash its fury. Clara felt the walls pulse, shadows casting elongated figures that seemed to tango in malicious glee. Mom, we have to do something, Jake urged, his small frame quaking against her side. Clara took a deep breath, ignoring the suffocating darkness closing in. We will find a way out, Jake. Hold tight. Her voice trembled, but she was resolute. They had already fought too hard to succumb now. With trembling hands, Clara scanned the room, searching for anything that could help. Listen to me, she shouted, facing the ghostly woman. You'll never have him. The shadows recoiled momentarily, as if her resolve had pricked their darkness. Suddenly, a flicker of light emerged from a nearby corner, a glimmer breaking through the oppressive gloom. Clara seized the moment, ripping Jake from the thrall of horror. This way, she shouted, dashing toward the luminous beacon. The air vibrated with the echoes of furious laughter and pleading cries as they ran, each step feeling like a miracle against the pressures of the darkness. As they reached the light, it expanded, becoming a swirling vortex of color and sound. Clara felt an unfamiliar warmth envelop them, a gentle hand against the chaos. It radiated hope and invitation to escape. Mom, it's calling to us, Jake said, eyes wide with wonder. It's our chance, Clara insisted, lurching forward, lacing their fingers together as they dove into the embrace of light. In an instant, they were engulfed, memories flooding their minds, their connection. Their past, cherishing laughter, late-night talks, and little victories wrapped in the fabric of their bond. But just as quickly, a chilling presence clawed back at them. The laughter shifted into wails, sorrowful yet angry. You can't escape the truth, echoed the shadows, reverberating as Clara and Jake were thrust back into reality. They tumbled into a blindingly bright clearing. For a heartbeat, she didn't know what had happened. Where were they? Clara squinted against the glare, pain in her eyes making her reflexively shield Jake with her body. It's okay, we're safe, she assured him, heart hammering in relief. Look, before them unfolded a sunlit meadow. The lush grass brushed against her legs, the air clear and inviting. The shadows were gone, the whispers silenced. And yet, in the corners of their minds lingered a gnawing sense of loss, an echo of what they had faced. They both paused, breathless, registering the weight of what they had escaped. Mom, Jake mumbled, scanning the horizon. What just happened? I think we broke the chains, Clara said, the tremor in her voice slowly ebbing away. But we'll need to remember, we can't forget. In that moment, the sky shifted and Clara felt a warmth spread through her, curling around her heart. The ghosts of the cabin of laughter woven with pain reminded her that their fight held the power to rejoice. They had their truth, the lessons they needed to embrace, buried beneath layers of terror as they stood together. The sun behind them painted a golden silhouette. Behind the meadow lay the distant woods, no longer ominous but a promise of resilience. With renewed purpose, Clara knelt beside Jake. We will heal, she declared, not just ourselves, but the stories we carry from our past. We will face whatever comes next together. Jake nodded, his gaze steady, a flicker of understanding in his young eyes. Together, Mom. And side by side, they began their forward journey, the weight of their past lifting, a lightness restored as they walked hand in hand toward the horizon. But somewhere in the fragments of their memories, the shadows still lingered, awaiting their next chance, a reminder woven into the fabric of their lives. In the spaces between darkness and light, remember, sometimes our greatest battles can lead us home. Now, if you enjoyed this conclusion, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and spread the love. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything to us.